morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Matthews, First Vice President, Financial Advisor and Portfolio Management Director with Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, and a past Pinnacle honoree. On behalf of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce and Morgan Stanley, welcome to day one of the Women's Network Annual Pinnacle Awards. As a past Pinnacle honoree, it is my great pleasure to introduce this brilliant panel. But first, I've been asked to share my Pinnacle story. This is also the 25th anniversary of my move to Boston to run a financial services firm. I knew no one in Boston when I moved here. So my first call was to Paul Guzzi, who was the current CEO of the chamber at the time. Paul was most welcoming. We had lunch together, and at that time, we created a great partnership. At the end of the lunch, we determined that the best way that we could work together was for Paul to introduce me to 3 new people at each meeting. And in turn, he asked that I help him to build the recently formed Women's Network Advisory Council. It was the beginning of a long-lasting and productive relationship. 2 years later, I was honored to receive a Pinnacle Award. Now, 25 years after moving here, I've enjoyed and benefited greatly from my involvement on the Women's Network Advisory Council, the Chamber Board, among others, and as a result of my chamber contacts and the committees I've joined. To this day, those friendships I made through the chamber became my core group of friends and my champions. I will always credit and thank the chamber for the success I've achieved here in Boston, for taking this one-time stranger into the community with welcome arms. So now on to the program. Morgan Stanley is proud to be a longstanding sponsor and supporter of the awards program, celebrating leading female professionals in the Boston business community. We love this event. It embraces our core values of diversity and inclusion and giving back. Today, I have the honor of introducing your speakers for today's workshop, Empowering Leadership. All our panelists today are not only inspiring leaders in our community, but also previous Pinnacle Awards honorees. First, we are joined by Pam Everhart, Senior Vice President, Head of Regional Public Affairs and Community Relations at Fidelity Investments, and last year's honoree for Lifetime Achievement. Geez, Pam, you're too young for that. Alongside Pam, we hear from Achievement in Entrepreneurship, Jennifer Harrington, President and founder of Hatch the Agency. Next, I'd like to welcome Emerging Executive winner, Julie Livingstone, Senior Development Manager at the HYM Management Group. And leading today's conversation is Susan Loconto Penta, Managing Partner and Co-founder of MIDIOR Consulting, a past honoree for achievement in entrepreneurship and advisory board chair for the Women's Network. You can find all their bios below the video stream on this page so we can maximize our conversation time. Before we jump in, I encourage you to submit your questions throughout the conversation using the feature on the right-hand side of your screen. We're setting aside time at the end for audience Q&A. And also, please utilize the chat feature and share stories and ideas. Our goal is to make today's content as interactive as possible. Finally, the program is being recorded and will be posted to the Chamber's YouTube a week from today. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Susan to kick off the conversation.
Oh,
Susan?
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for everything. Everyone here is such a role model, and you're always so wonderful hosting a table at the Pinnacle Awards and for all past participants and so forth. So thank you, and thank you for sponsoring. Wow. I am with a group of champions today, spanning the generations and the years. So you are all in for such a treat. These are such complicated times. So it feels like I do need to just acknowledge that we are having the opportunity to do something so fun and celebrate other women as we lift everyone up. And this is so important when times are troubled and complex. And so thank you to all of you for joining us, for being women, for being role models, for supporting your families and your communities as what all of us are going to need. So I am going to dive right in. I want to start by letting the audience hear a little bit about each of you. You're such, an inspiration, each of you in your own ways. Your journeys are fascinating. And I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about yourself. Pam, maybe you can start, and then we could go to Jen and then Julie.
Susan, thank you so much. And I'm so humbled to be a part of this great panel. All of the accomplishments of the women are just fantastic. So I'm a Texan, but however, I've been in Boston for 35 years. So some people will say, well, that makes you a Bostonian. I think when you're a Texan, you're always a Texan. But anyway, in terms of how I started out, I graduated from the University of Texas with an accounting degree. So I started my career with EY in Houston. I was always fascinated with business and finance and numbers and wanted to make sure everything balanced. However, now I hardly ever balance my checkbook. But anyway, that was how I got started off. And in addition to working at EY, I also did a lot of volunteer work during my off time. So I always had a focus on how I can make an impact and a meaningful difference in people's lives. So after a few years at EY, I applied to law school. So I moved to the Boston area where I attended Harvard Law. And there I had an opportunity to meet and know and build a relationship with, at the time, just Barack Obama and Michelle Robinson. And what I gained from that is that relationships matter. I always tell my team R before T, relationships before task. So that was my first beginning of developing relationships with people in the Boston area. After graduating from law school, I then spent 4 years at the law firm of Ropes and Gray. And while I was at Ropes and Gray, once again, thinking about relationships, I had an opportunity to mentor this young law student, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is now being considered for the Supreme Court. So once again, you just never know, but all of this happened in Boston. So I worked at Ropes for a while and then moved on to Fidelity Investments, where I've had a number of senior roles. I started off in the legal department. I went to the compliance group. I worked in the business. I did federal government relations. I did strategy work. And then I have one of my dream jobs now is that I had regional public affairs and community relations. And in this role, once again, going back to my early years at Ernst & Young, where I wanted to focus on making a difference for people's lives. In my day job right now at heading up community relations, I'm able to do that, able to meet my passion and also get paid. So that's what keeps me motivated in my job, is passion for the work and the ability to drive transformational change.
Awesome. Thank you. So you've already gotten a key takeaway, R before T. I'm going to remember that one and credit you, Pam. Jen.
I feel like I have to start by saying, Pam, to be on a panel with you I'm a little starstruck. I have to be honest, you have just done so much for the community, as has everyone on the panel. But even hearing your story, it reminds me of some of the things that I know I read and watched when I was starting my career, and very inspired by what you've done. My background is not as is pretty straightforward, actually. I've spent my entire career in advertising and branding. The only time that I sort of strayed from that was a brief stint at an art gallery right after I graduated from school. I was an art history major. I went to BU, and I was really, really struggling with what to do for my career. And so today, when I stand here and I think about, like, how did I get started? I guess I started in an art gallery, but I got really curious about what it would be like to work with creative people and find a career path that was in business. And very early on, I started to do a lot of networking, and I started to meet with a lot of people, really asking the question, how do you connect the dots between sort of creative and creativity and business? And through the course of those conversations, I sort of describe as the world sort of opened up for me. And all of a sudden I realized that there were whole industries that were dedicated to creativity, whether that's like industrial design or graphic design or advertising. And I sort of tripped into advertising and never left. What has always motivated me is, and still motivates me today, is that I have a huge passion for the arts. And I really, really value creativity. Whether creative is in somebody's title or not, I think it's really an important currency for change. And I continue to pursue that myself.
Awesome. Thank you. Such different stories, such inspiring stories. Julie, I know you have another different story.
I do, and it is fascinating and such an honor to be on a panel with these so accomplished women. My story is a bit different. I went to undergrad and studied brain and cognitive sciences, thinking I was going to be pre-med. And about my junior year, found urban planning and architecture, and graduated. Went into a year of national service, working down in the Gulf Coast. It was post Hurricane Katrina. I was working in tie-dye suits down in Louisiana in August. Helping the recovery efforts down along the southeast part of the US. The next year, I moved to DC and I worked for the Corporation for National and Community Service, which is a federal agency that oversees the AmeriCorps program. I learned a lot about federal appropriations and grant making at the national level, and how that can drive community development at the local level, how that can really support and galvanize momentum of local issues and help resolve issues that individual communities are facing. I transitioned then on to a couple of years at grad school, studied public policy and urban planning, moved down to Philadelphia, worked at the National Constitution Center for a few years, helping that organization, that nonprofit, actually go through an executive transition, and moved back to Boston. That wasn't really what I had gone to grad school to do, and moved back to Boston and jumped on Ed Markey's campaign for US Senate. It was a special election back in 2013, and then spent a little bit of time thinking about what I wanted to do next. I knew that I was passionate about meeting people, that I was passionate about the intersections of so many different political, social, environmental, socioeconomic pressures that affected the recovery efforts down in the Gulf Coast, and wanted to do something that kind of married all of those together. The more and more people I talked to in Boston, I felt like I was building Team Julie, to be honest, and people kept directing me to Tom O'Brien. So I met with Tom. Tom is the founder and managing partner of the HYM Investment Group. I started with him as an intern, and have worked my way up to being a leader in the company. And it's been a tremendous experience. So we do large-scale mixed-use urban redevelopment projects. I've been focused for most of my real estate career on Bullfinch Crossing, which is the transformation of the government center garage, and the impact that it has on the skyline in Boston. And the thread line for me really throughout all these different transitions and experiences, is really meeting people, and that concept of placemaking, of community development, of this opportunity of how the built environment really affects the way that we come together and create neighborhoods, create community.
Awesome. I've always said to my now late 20-something daughters, place matters, right? Place matters. And in your bio, you talk about making memories. And so, thank you for what you're doing for Boston. Thank you to all three of you. All right. So I have about 25 questions, and we probably will get through just a handful. But I'm going to start. I'm sure everyone that's listening in is going to be interested about how entrepreneurs and professional women can build their networks and strategic relationships. Pam talked about Arbor 4T. I'm just going to love that. I think I'm going to say it about 10 times today. And so I wonder if each of you could weigh in on that. Jen, maybe you could start. Being in advertising and the agency world and whatnot, you are all about creating that kind of thing. And then Jen, maybe we could go from you to Julie and then to Pam.
Sure. I thought this was a great question. I think that building a network is probably job number one as an entrepreneur. It's really the currency of business. I think relationships, the R before the T are really, really critical. And it's probably even more critical in the early days of a business, because you're often asking people to take a chance on your idea or on you. And so if you have good relationships in place, you can have some of those honest conversations sometimes, but those business building relationships become really, 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 really valuable. I have found in my own career that it's really important to explore opportunities beyond my own sort of natural network. And we all have communities that we operate in, but it's really important to be intentional about going to places or communities or organizations that aren't necessarily something that might be something that you're curious in, or provide an opportunity to meet and network with different types of people. And I personally have found that really valuable. I think there are so many wonderful organizations in Boston. The Chamber is clearly one, and was actually very instrumental for me in terms of networking and relationship building. But they all present great ways to meet new people. Early in my career, I spent a lot of time trying to understand sort of what was out there. And I was really curious, but I was also really inspired to learn from area leaders that were speaking on different panels or, in conversations like this. And I have so many memories, for those of you who have been to the women's breakfast, of getting up very, very early so that I could get into the city in time for the networking before everybody sat down at their various and sundry tables. To meet, other young people or peers or leaders that were there for those events. And one of the best parts for me in terms of starting to build relationships earlier on in my career was sitting at a table, whether it was at the Chamber or somewhere else, with a group of people that I didn't know, and really going out of my way to make connections and try to find, conversation lines and get over feeling a little nervous about introducing yourself, and then be very specific and forthright about following up. Back in the day, you exchanged business cards. Today, I think we do like LinkedIn, but I tried to be very focused on making sure that those initial connections were followed up with more significant conversation or at least an understanding of, what somebody else who's sitting at the table might be interested in. And over time, I think I expanded my network, and then I learned from other people who were also very forthright about making sure that they invited new and younger professionals into some of those events so that they had access, to that. And, I think there were so many women early in my career, and certainly when I started my business, who went very far out of their way to be helpful. And so one other thing I wanted to say about today is I remember being sort of intimidated to reach out to certain people. And I think there's so much goodwill, certainly in Boston, but more broadly, and people are looking for opportunities to help young professionals, particularly in this environment, as you said, Susan.
Awesome. Thanks. Julie, you talked a little bit about this when you were talking about your journey and you were building Team Julie. And so what advice might you have for people to build their networks and in particular, strategic relationships?
Yeah, great question. I think everybody has a story, and you've heard our stories today on screen, and everybody wants to share their story. And I think women sometimes are a little less readily reticent to share. And so asking women especially, what gets them up in the morning? What are they passionate about? I found that to be really effective in terms of relationship building, because everybody can speak very genuinely about their own experience. So it's not very threatening, right? And making those connections. You never know. Boston's a small town. You never know how people maybe have one professional persona, but then on their weekends, they're volunteering at a whole variety of ways, or networks are very integrated. And so, so I would just say, never really discount someone, and if there's an opportunity to identify on a personal level with someone, that makes the connection all that much more stronger.
And Pam, I mean, your whole journey is a great example of making relationships and not ever knowing, but making sure you nurture all of them. What about you? What would you say to everyone on the call today?
Oh, just very quickly, I would say be authentic. It is too hard trying to be someone else. And sometimes you forget what they were doing. So I've always done that. And then you never know where you're going to connect. Going back to what Julie said, there may be a connection. You never know unless you being yourself. And the other thing I would say is, sometimes women have a challenge around this. It's okay to ask for help. Men do it all the time. And you know what? When you ask, people appreciate it. If I go to Jen, call up Jen and say, I'm dealing with this, I need some help. Could you help? I appreciate it every day. So be authentic and ask. And I remember when I first came to Boston, a person who was a president at a local bank said to me, Pam, I'm well connected, use me. So I tell my mentees right now, I said, use me, I'm available to help.
Yeah, I mean, I tell anyone that I mentor a similar thing to the extent that if you ask, people usually say yes. And if they can't help you, they'll say no. And so you're one step ahead. All right. So in the interest of time, I'm actually going to go to a question for each of you. And Julie, I think maybe I'll start with you, and then Pam, I'll go to you, and then Jen, I'll go to you. So Julie, what are some of the biggest barriers, or I suppose toughest challenges that you faced in the growth stage, and how did you actually break through? Because we would all say that you've broken through.
Well, thank you. I still think I have a lot to learn and grow.
We probably all do, but.
But one of the hardest things, and I feel like I'm still facing this, but is delegation, and not internalizing that as I can't do it, and therefore I'm giving it to someone else to do, or feeling the guilt associated with delegation, where maybe it's something that I interpret it as something that I don't want to do, or a lesser task or something of that sort, and by reframing it and by reminding myself and, having mentors help remind me as well, that's really denying others learning opportunities. And by thinking about it that way, it really has helped me feel more comfortable with delegation in a way where I need to delegate. There's much work to go around, but also, to reframe it that way, just it's empowering. As opposed to that feeling of guilt.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great piece of advice, and hard to do, right? Especially when it's going to take longer, potentially. So, okay, Pam, maybe you could talk a little bit about, and you've got so many different organizations that you've impacted and that you're still involved in. Talk about the power and importance of leveraging individual and frankly, the collective power to work together in community organizations.
Well, I would say this, our opportunity to make a difference really came about very intentionally in 2020 with COVID and with the murder of George Floyd. And then I think we all realize that either individually or collectively, and even big corporations, we can play a role to make the world better, to be more inclusive, and to be more respectful. But to get there, we have to be able to listen, to learn, and then sometimes unlearn. And at Fidelity, the way we did that, we reached out to community leaders, those geniuses on the ground doing the work to find out what they really needed versus coming in and saying, we have all the answers. I remember talking to one participant who was a community leader, and they said, you know what, showing up is key and pushing hard for change is necessary, but you must recognize you're not coming in to save the day. You are coming in because you recognize that there are issues that existed and you're here to help. But to be able to help, you have to know what they need and not come in knowing that you have all the answers. So I would say to everyone, listen, learn, and unlearn, and then try to drive change.
Listen, learn, and unlearn. Okay. Jen, for you, we'll go to you, and then we're going to go to some questions that have been coming in. So what's a piece of advice you would give women who are currently looking at following their passion and trying to start a company, given the landscape today and the times that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, you know, there's sort of the good side and the bad side of the times, you know, and for as much as the bad times have been difficult, I think it's created amazing opportunities for entrepreneurs in many places that we might not have anticipated 2 or 3 years ago. So it is a difficult time. It's definitely a difficult talent environment for hiring. But I think there's tons of opportunity out there. I mean, my probably the thing that was the most valuable to me when I first started Hatch was I talked to as many people as I possibly could. I really wanted advice on the business. I wanted advice on the offering. I wanted to know what was working, what wasn't working. I wanted to talk to prospective customers. I remember I did a focus group. Actually, one of my friends did a focus group for me with a bunch of CMOs to try to understand, like, what were they looking for? What wasn't being met in the marketplace? But most importantly, I think a lot of those conversations helped me avoid some really common mistakes. So I would do as much, networking and relationship building and get as much advice as possible. And I do think that, just to go back to the comment on asking for help, there are so many great people who've been through this before, have been through building a business, or they know what some of the, common challenges are, or to Pam's point, they can put you in touch with people that can be helpful to you. And if you're really, if you're excited about your idea, then go talk to people and network and ask for help. And I think that will be a great platform for refining your idea, but also, getting started.
On that theme of listen, learn, and unlearn where necessary.
I love unlearn. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we have some questions that have come in, and I'm just going to take them from the top. One participant says, curious how you help support women as they grow, since there's a problem with ageism in many companies. I'm not sure exactly how to interpret that, but Julie, I don't know if you have a thought on that.
Sure. One thing that I find to be really important is to I guess this gets back to delegation even, to make sure that the women around me feel like I have their back, and, we're working together to, advance, whatever it is that we're focused on. That we're doing it again together, that we each have our own responsibilities, in that I'm an outlet, and I lean on other people as well. I think the comment about ask for help is a very much a common theme, where people are actually complimented when you ask for help, and so that transcends up and down. So asking for help from someone who is younger from you, they're going to have a different idea. They're going to have a different perspective, and more likely than not, they haven't been asked their opinion on something before or on this particular topic.
Right. Pam, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, coming from Fidelity, which is a huge organization. And I know you've done, a lot lifting women up, lifting minorities up. Maybe you have some thoughts about how to deal with ageism and supporting women as they move on up.
Well, this is what I would say in terms of supporting women, is that we have to realize that we can have it all without doing it all. And that goes back to what Julie said about delegation. That's exactly right. I remember going into the pandemic when I was home and my son from college came home and my daughter was home and my husband was working. So we were all there. And I thought at first, I'm going to be the best mom ever. My son, who's a football player, was back. I'm going to cook dinner every day. That got old. After about 2 weeks, I'm like, I just can't. I can't do this. So I delegated. I thought about the skill sets I had at work. I'm like, we got a team here. This is Team Everhart. My husband's name is Kwaku. Team Everhart Kwaku. Everyone has a role and we're going to delegate. And I started delegating the dinner. And I said, I don't care if you cook it, if you order it in or whatever, everyone will have a day. So that's what I would say to women is, you know, sometimes you have to delegate and when you delegate it, let it go. I mean, I try to delegate stuff to my husband, then I try to tell him how to do it. That doesn't work at all. And then the other thing, I read this great book called Drop the Ball by Tiffany Dufu, D-U-F-U. Sorry, F-U, sorry, but that's how it is. But anyway, what I learned is that she said, it's okay to drop the ball. We don't have to do everything, but you prioritize, right? Do the most important things and the things that are going to drive impact, and the other things, drop the ball. So I tell my folks at work, focus on the high priority things, the other things, drop the ball, and a year later, no one will even care.
Right, they're not gonna remember.
Exactly.
I'm gonna remember Pam on my shoulder about the dinner point. You can see all the vowels in my name. I still struggle with that. I'm actually gonna move to a next question because I think it's directed at you, Jen. What are some tips and steps to branding or refreshing your brand? It doesn't say personal brand, but I'm assuming maybe it was about personal brand. It might be about the company brand, but anyway, tips, steps.
Yeah, I mean, branding is one of those big words that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, which I usually
need like 10 hours for that one.
Right, like to clients. But ultimately, brands are for people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are thinking about branding yourself and you want to use that as a way to create relationships, or you're thinking about branding a company because you're trying to create engagement or goodwill or set expectations or whatever your goals are, you really have to start by understanding who you're talking to, what it is that they are worried about, what else is competing in their minds for headspace, and how can you make a personal connection. I mean, I think sometimes these things can get very academic, but branding really comes down to understanding people and finding a meaningful and, to Pam's comment, authentic way to engage.
And of course, if your brand and who you are as a person don't dovetail, it's hard to be authentic, right?
And most people will figure that out pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly,
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean,
absolutely.
we all, it's usually.
And we're all too busy for that, actually. All right, there's a question here. I'm gonna skip over one of them and ask a question because I'm sure everyone that's listening in will want to hear the answer from each of you. What are the important indicators to recognize when it's time to pivot, switch jobs, or jump into an entirely different career path? Who wants to go first?
I'll start first.
Okay.
When there's no longer passion in the work. And that's what drives me.
Yeah.
You know, because I come to work every day, not thinking about it as a job, but as a part of my life mission in the terms of the work I do at Fidelity. And I realize that I'm making a difference. When I no longer have that passion, then I stop giving 150%. So that's for me, passion for the work and what you're doing and making a difference in lives.
And Pam's journey, if you have read her 50-page bio, right, and she's done all of that in her short time here, is a great indication that you can do it, right? I mean, you're the model for, you can be an accountant, you can be a lawyer, you can go be, in community organizations and so forth. Great, thank you. Jen.
I actually have sort of a new philosophy on this. I don't know if it's a good one. I think that is a lot of times there's a lot of pressure on young professionals to find a career path and then land somewhere and be there for a while or pursue that for a while. And I sort of feel like go bold, like be creative. If you're not sure if you're at the right place, then start interviewing And if you don't find something that you like more, then maybe you'll get a better sense of what you want at the job that you have, or the world will open up and you'll say, I don't want to be an accountant anymore. I want to be a lawyer. Or I just think that sort of keeping your mind open to exploratory is so important. You don't necessarily have to make a decision about staying or going. And I think now in particular, people are moving around a lot, and that diversity of experience is so, it's so important and so valuable. So I don't know when the right time is, but if you're questioning it, you should go, look into it and talk to people and explore other job opportunities and see if something else pulls on you stronger than what you're doing.
And it relates to what you said earlier about talking to a lot of people, right? By talking to people, you're going to learn, and that's going to help you. Okay, Julie.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize that it never hurts to talk to people. You're not, especially, if you're not sure what you want to do, then there's no, overarching premise of I'm asking you for a job, right? And I think once that is no longer kind of the crux of the conversation, people are very open and confident in sharing what they do on a day-to-day basis. And, and that's important. We graduate, we're challenged, entering college, thinking and having to identify a career or a major that is going to dictate the rest of our lives. And then we graduate from college, and this academic career kind of sometimes you continue that in graduate school or professional schools, but oftentimes then it's like, oh my gosh, here's the real world, right? And sometimes it's just about taking that step and knowing that it doesn't have to be forever. And that's kind of what I did. And it's also, I think if you if there's something that you feel passionate about, getting to Pam's point, that it's going to carry you. You're going to give it your all. You're going to want to be there every day. You're going to want to give it your best. And kind of when that starts to change, and it's okay that it starts to change. It could be for a whole variety of reasons. It's okay to explore other things or change entirely. I started as an intern in real estate development after having a graduate degree. And it was because I wanted to try something new, and that's okay. Taking risks, taking chances, it means that, you're empowering yourself to take control of your career.
Awesome. All right, one more question, and so this is a big question, and it relates to what we're trying to do as a chamber and a community, right? One of our roles as the chamber is to convene conversation, convene community, and really create as strong an ecosystem as we can for businesses to thrive in Boston, to come here, to stay here. So from each of your perspectives, what can we do to make sure that we have the best talent pipeline, to encourage businesses to come here, small and large, to keep them here? And Julie, I think I'm going to start with you, seeing as how you're creating some place for us here in Boston.
Great question. I think, in terms of encouraging younger generations, in terms of retaining talent, Boston has, an incredible education and academic foundation here. Perhaps is creating more of those pipelines, tying into those academic settings and bridging the gap between what's happening in education and what's happening in the business world, and creating more collaboration and partnerships there.
Awesome, thank you. And I do want to get Jen and Pam in quickly, and we're getting the signal that we're coming up to time. Jen.
I could not agree more with what Julie just said. I think that businesses and all of us as business people and members of the community need to really, really lean in and create on-ramps and pathways for young and diverse talent to come into the fields that we have here in Boston. We have a huge competitive advantage with the schools that we have, and I think would be a lost opportunity not to really work hard to help people stay here and find a path here.
Mm-hmm. All right, Pam.
I would just add that I think businesses need to be more flexible. We have a whole new generation of top talent, and they have options. they can work from almost anywhere these days.
Yes.
Right. So I think we have to do that and come up with benefits and programs that support them and their families and their interests.
Such an important point. Okay. Oh my goodness. You're all such rock stars. This was so fun. I'm going to recap a couple of quick notes. Of course, R before T, relationships before task. Thank you, Pam. We're all going to be using that. Sitting with people that you don't know, voice of the whoever, audience, customer, prospect, colleague. Ask women to share their stories. Yeah, that's how you bring them into the conversation. Get them talking about themselves. Be authentic. A couple other things that I wrote down: delegate, delegate, delegate. Even if it means it might demonstrate or somehow indicate you don't know what you're doing, or it might take longer. It's how others are going to get the opportunity to learn. Listen, learn, unlearn. Love that. We can have it all without doing it all. I think the book Drop the Ball was mentioned. I'm sure we'll be able to post that somewhere. And we've all just heard about the importance of passion and how it relates to pivoting, right? If you're not happy, pivot, take some risks, go bold. Thank you all. On behalf of the chamber, thank you, Pam, Jen, Julie. You're wonderful, awesome. I feel like I could sit and talk to you forever, as I'm sure everybody here can. You are all inspirations. And to everyone that's logged in, we appreciate it.